Hey there, greetings everyone. Welcome back to Weekly CTI. And boy, I am so glad to be back in the old saddle with you good folks. We're going to learn a little bit about Kubernetes today and a new emerging threats that is exploiting their RBAC system inside of clusters for backdoors and cryptocurrency mining. Oh man, tons of stuff going on there. Like I said, I'm glad to be back in the saddle because I was at a conference last week, so I didn't get to film a weekly CTI. So we kind of broke the streak there, but it was for a good cause, right? Hey, by the way, if there's like a cybersecurity meetup of some type around you in your area or somewhere that you can get to, you should totally do that because they are a lot of fun. You learn a lot of stuff, and you get to mingle with other folks in the cybersecurity space, networking, right? It's not just cables and stuff anymore. It's people. We get to do that. You should. It's fun. All right. So let's get into today's topic. Like I said, it's all about the old Kubernetes, which, full disclosure, I'm not fully checked out on. I've barely done much, if anything at all, with Kubernetes. So that's why I kind of found this to be an interesting thing that's going on. And we go to the Hacker News for the main article, right? Kubernetes RBAC exploited in large-scale campaign for cryptocurrency mining. Well, there it is. Stealing money. That's basically why attackers attack. I remember when I was young and like hackers, they did this for what seemed to be just street cred. Just look what I can do, right? They had access to stuff. It was all, but now it's just all about money. It's weird. Large-scale attack campaign discovered in the wild has been exploiting Kubernetes or K8s role-based access control to create backdoors and run cryptocurrency miners. Quote, the attackers also deployed DaemonSets or DaemonSets. How do you say that? Demon or Daemon? I typically do say Daemon, but I read that as demon. Fun. I digress. DaemonSets to take over and hijack resources of K8s clusters they attack, and quote, the cloud security firm Aqua said in their report shared with the Hacker News. The Israeli company, which dubbed this attack RBAC Buster, said it found 60 exposed K8s clusters that have been exploited by the threat actor behind this campaign. Full disclosure, they didn't name a threat actor. They didn't give anybody's description. And honestly, there weren't a lot of IOCs, and none were actually called out as IOCs, but that's cool. You can kind of pick up whatever you can. We do have some mitigations that we will take a look at. So there is that. We'll get there. We'll get there, right? I'm putting the cart and the horse wrong spot. Let's start at the beginning. Picture this: Sicily, 1947, just after the war. There's a Kubernetes cluster ready to be attacked. So let's get back into this. Let's actually jump to the Aqua Security blog, which you should totally check out if you've never heard of cloud before. It's kind of a big deal. And Aqua, that's kind of their focus. So check out blog.aquaset.com. That should be one of your frequent haunts. Okay? Because the old scallywags over there at the AquaSec, they are smart at this cloud thing, and they kind of enrich our lives as cybersecurity professionals when it comes to it. And you probably have a cloud environment in your organization. So it would behoove you to learn a little bit about the cybersecurity that surrounds those clouds. All right, so what's going on here? So here's an overview of the thing, right? So we've read this part. Let's get into this where it says the attack. It says we have recorded and analyzed an attack on one of our K8s honeypots, which utilized the RBAC system to gain persistence. So the RBAC system is specifically for persistence. Good to know. Thank you, AquaSec. The attack, the motive behind the attack is for mining Monero, as it says right there. Okay. So the initial access, and this is always one of our favorite things, is how the heck do they get into my system? What was their road? What door did they open, or what door did I leave open, which is typically what happens. So gets you every time, won't it? An overlooked security faux pas and they're in. And unfortunately, that's why cybersecurity is hard, because there's a lot of complex things happening in your environments, and it's really easy to overlook stuff. And unfortunately, again, the attackers only need to find that one thing you overlooked. And have you ever done any kind of coding, right? Or you can't get something to work. You've been at it for hours. You're banging your head against the wall, right? And somebody walks over and goes, "Hey, did you mean to leave that semicolon out?" And immediately they see it. And you feel like the biggest idiot in the, I'm speaking to myself, right? That's how I feel. I hate that feeling. I hate that when people come over and go, "Hey, you misspelled that." And I'm like, "You're right. I sure did." Anyway, that's how I feel about this kind of stuff. All right, so that's what's going on here. The initial access was gained via a misconfigured API server that allowed unauthenticated requests from anonymous users. Well, there is that. Why did we do that? Well, we probably didn't mean to. It's just something that happens from time to time. I deal with AWS a lot, and that is one of the things you look for. Can any user in AWS do anything, list things, show things, give me details? Hey, maybe I can actually, like list S3 buckets. That's something you do. Like I said, I know a lot about Kubernetes, but I'm going to learn a little bit today. Hopefully you do too. All right, so they're unauthenticated. That is hard to say. Unauthenticated requests from anonymous users. That's a bad idea. The attacker sent a few HTTP requests to list secrets and then made 2 API requests to gain information about the cluster by listing the entities in the kube-system namespace. Next, the attacker checked if the attack had already been deployed. Well, that's a good idea. You would hate to be like an agent from the redundant Department of Redundancy. That would be dumb. So they just check, hey, have I already been here and done this and got the t-shirt? Well, if I have, I'm just going to move down the road. But they also check to see, I think it's in the next sentence. Yeah. The attacker also attempted to delete some existing deployments in various namespaces, including kube-secure, I don't know what's going on there. Kube-secure FHGXT. And I guess we got FHGXT, blah, blah, blah. API proxy and worker deployment. I like those because I can say those. So it says they assume that this was for looking for, maybe they've done a legacy campaign and they were cleaning that up. Or it could be like a competing organization, a competing threat actor. And they're like, they're not sure, right? So it says a competitor's campaign. But what they're ultimately trying to do is make sure that they have plenty of resources, that they don't want to exhaust it and raise red flags and go, oh, the server tipped over. What happened there? Let's check some logs. Oh, this thing was going buck wild before it fell on its face because there's a crypto miner in there. That'll do it. That'll get you every time. Billy, here's the thing. When you got yourself a server stood up and it is just full out pegged RPMs, because there's a crypto miner running, that's going to cause it to fall over on its face and go pow pow. And that's going to make somebody go, why is the server smoking? What is wrong with this thing? And then the jig is up at that point. So they did their due diligence and said, hey, if anything's, let's make sure there's plenty of resources for everyone, including us, so that we can, mine that Monero as one does. All right, says the most interesting part about this attack was when the attacker used the RBAC to gain persistence. So that is a part of that old, those kill chains that we see so much, those methodologies. We have initial access, usually starting with recon, footprinting. Then you gain access to the system. Once you do that, you probably start doing things like, loading crypto miners, creating backdoors for persistence so that you can stick around. Sometimes we see exfiltration of data. and so on and so forth, right? They do like stealth thrown in there for good measure. So don't forget that. But here we are seeing RBAC being used specifically for persistence. And that is, like they say, the interesting thing here. The attacker created a new cluster role with near admin level privileges. I wonder why they didn't go with full admin level privileges. Interesting. Since it was a cluster role, it was not bound to a specific namespace. So I thought, okay, I don't know. I know what RBAC is, but I don't know about RBAC inside of Kubernetes, right? So let me learn a little bit about that. I pulled this up. Here's the Kubernetes docs. This is a bit small, so I should probably make the font in a size you could probably read. It says role-based access control is a method of regulating access to computer or network resources based on the roles of individual users within your organization. Cool. Like I said, did I talk about this? I don't remember if I did. If I did, RBAC. We like it. It's useful. I make a role, right? And then I can put access to things. I give permissions, right? And then if I set that role on your user account or maybe a service account, then you get the permissions that are assigned to that role, right? We like it. It's nice. RBAC authorization uses the RBAC authorization.k8s.io API group to drive blah, blah, blah. Got some, there's API objects. Caution, these objects by design impose access restrictions if you are making changes to a cluster as you learn. See privilege escalation prevention and bootstrapping. That's probably a good idea. Role and cluster role. Now, if we go back, they said that it was a, wait for it, cluster role. So therefore, it is not bound to a specific namespace. Let's see. We go to RBAC role or cluster role contains rules that represent a set of permissions. Permissions are purely additive. There are no deny rules. Okay. So it's only for giving access, not denying access. Cluster role, by contrast of role, is a non-namespace resource. The resources have different names, role and cluster role, because Kubernetes objects always have to have either namespaced or non-namespaced. Can't be both. Interesting. Cluster roles have several uses. You can use a cluster role to define permissions on namespaced resources and be granted access within individual namespaces, define permissions on namespace resources and be granted access across all namespaces, or define permissions on cluster scoped resources. If you want to define a role within a namespace, use role. If you want to define a role cluster-wide, use cluster role. Okay, now we know a little bit more about cluster role, and probably why they ended up using this was because they wanted to go cluster-wide and not on a specific namespace. All right, so let's head back. Next, they created a service account called kube-controller in the kube-system namespace. Lastly, the attacker created a ClusterRoleBinding, binding the cluster role within the service with the service account to create a strong and inconspicuous persistence. We're going to talk a little bit more about this. Spoiler alert, I read the article, so I know what's going to happen. And that's why this is an interesting thing on why it's inconspicuous. We're going to get to. So here is how that works. We've got this API version, metadata, annotations, not a lot going on in there. There is the system controller, kube controller. And then the API groups are starred out. You notice there's the star. We got API groups and star. Then you got resources, star. Verbs, star. I don't know if you know this, but those stars, you got non-resource URL star, verb star. Those stars mean they're a catch-all for everything. So when you see star, that means give me all the verbs. Give me all the non-resource URLs. Give me all the API groups and all the resources within and all the verbs that go along with that. I want to be able to do all the things. Does that make sense? So this is what's cool about that, is that after this, and this is where they really showed their skill, right? Is that after they've created this, they now have access regardless of what, if someone comes along and goes, Billy, quick question. Did you know that we were allowing anonymous, unauthorized access to certain secret pieces of information. Why is that? And Billy goes, I don't know, but these crayons are delicious. And we go, why does he work here? Who gives him control over these things? I know he's the boss's sister's son, but he's about as dumb as a sweet potato. And he has access. Okay, yeah, and this does happen. Billy works with you. So there is a Billy in just about everybody's organization. I don't know how that happens, but it does. And in our little scenario, Billy runs Kubernetes clusters. So there you go. And he sets permissions. So put down the purple crayons. I know they are the tastiest ones. Don't ask me how. But now we need to go back and set these permissions. So if they figure that out, back to our little story here, they figure that out and change the permissions to be more secure, our attackers still have persistence. They still have access because of what they've set up with this what do they call it? Service account. Yeah, duh. Right? They created this service account and attached it to this role, or cluster role, I guess is the more proper way of saying that. All right, so let's get back into the story here. So it says, additionally, while binding the cluster admin role to the new or to a new or suspicious user, that may set off alarms. So the attacker created a clever way to bind it nicely with the API audit log, or blend it nicely to the API audit logs. So if you're looking at this, things look legit, right? This system controller or kube controller, that is going to fly under the radar. It looks actually normal. That's something that would not pique someone's interest. Smart. All right. So they set some API keys for AWS access, not API keys, but AWS access keys. I'm sorry. And that's to entice them to go kind of further down the rabbit hole, which they did. The attacker then created a DaemonSet or DaemonSet. Again, I don't know how you say it. I don't know how I say it. Honestly, it's tomato. It would definitely look like. Again, not familiar with Kubernetes. Didn't know what a DaemonSet was. So I went to the documents for that. Let's take a look. A DaemonSet or DaemonSet ensures that all or some nodes run a copy of a pod. I was like, cool, what's a pod? So more documentation, right? You got to read. Welcome to cybersecurity. This is what we do here. Pods are the smallest deployable units of computing that you can create and manage in Kubernetes. A pod, as in a pod of whales or a pea pod, is a group of one or more containers with shared storage and network resources, and a specification for how to run the containers. A pod's contents are always co-located and co-scheduled and run in a shared context. A pod models an application-specific logical host. It contains one or more application containers which are relatively tightly coupled. I love when they use the words like relatively. Like, what does that mean? In a non-cloud context, applications executed on the same physical or virtual machine are analogous to cloud applications executed in the same logical host. So, all right. As well as application containers, pods contains init containers that run during pod startup. All right, that's getting down the rabbit hole on pods. Oh, what is a pod? Apparently a pod is a lot. It looks like a pod. This was probably the best thing they had. The smallest deployment unit, right? You can contain and manage. It's one or more containers using shared storage and network resources for a specific thing, right? And a specific a specification for how to run the containers. Interesting. Okay. Now I understand a little bit about what a pod is. Going back to DaemonSets. So a DaemonSet ensures that all or some nodes run a copy of a pod. So if I got a pod, it's got a bunch of containers in it, and kind of a play-by-play on how it should be run for what purpose and so on and so forth. I make a DaemonSet, and the DaemonSet tells either all or some, probably looking at all in this specific instance, on run this pod. I'm guessing, again, spoiler alert, I've read the end of the book here, so I know the last page. They want to do some cryptocurrency mining, so run the pod that does the cryptocurrency mining. And it goes, okay, I do that. It'll be fun for everybody. It's a good time. And then that's when the bad stuff happens. Okay. And then it says some typical uses of DaemonSets. Let me get you back up here. Are running cluster storage daemons on every node, running log collections, monitoring. This one's probably where we're going, but that's what's up. All right. And then you can even write your own DaemonSet. Here's how you do that. I love it when they give you examples. This seems to be quite the DaemonSet you got going on there. But let's head back to the story. They use the DaemonSet to deploy containers on all nodes with a single API request. The DaemonSet creation request object contained the container image kube-controller, Kuberntesio, kube-controller 1.0.1, hosted in a public Docker Hub registry, the public registry Docker Hub. So this is in Docker Hub. Okay, so it's a Docker container called Kuberntesio. Runs kube-controller, which we saw, and in this impact on the cluster was for resource hijacking. And there it is. Here's how you run that. Here's all that happening. That's the DaemonSet. Lots of fun. We see kube-controller. We got the namespace of kube-system. The app is called kube-controller. This is the application binary, what version it runs, the kind that it is, and we do see DaemonSet there. And then there's the image that it pulls. Booyah. All right. Well, inspecting the container, we found the container was pulled 14,399 times. Go pull it again, make it 14,400 evenly. 5 months ago, and it looks like we found another 60 exposed K8s clusters that had evidence of attacks by this attacker. That sounds awesome. The container has 3 tags. We analyzed all of them. Inside the container image, we found the binary kube-controller, which we saw. There is the MD5 hash for that, which they ran through VirusTotal, which it saw as a crypto miner. Let's right-click this. I believe that is, it takes us to the VirusTotal findings for that, so we should see this get popped as a crypto miner. I'd like to see how bad it is, so let's wait for it. It's coming. You can do it, VirusTotal. Whoa, 41 vendors and 1 sandbox has flagged this as malicious. Yep, and we see just about everybody and their brother says, hey, this is no bueno. It's a crypto miner. Coin miner. Coin miner. Coin miner. Yeah, we're seeing this as a coin miner. All right, there you go. Yeah. I zoomed in too much. I'm sorry. Booyah. All right. Anything else? It says that already on their instance, they had already mined 5 XMR. At the rate of mining, they could gain another 5 per year at $200 US from a single worker. I'm not sure if that works out. I'm going to pull my... If for each time this image was pulled from Docker Hub, we'll say, for the sake of an argument, that equals one worker, right? We'll say that for every time it was pulled, therefore it was installed on some Kubernetes cluster and is running a crypto miner. So if it was 14,399 times $200 per worker, that equals a lot of money. It looks like almost $3 million. And okay, so that's a pretty good little scam they got going on. It says $2,879,800. Now, let's just say for the sake of an argument, only half of those. That gives you $1.4 million. That's still not a bad take. Bastards. Anyway, don't do that. Stop stealing people's money because we know what you're doing, horrible things with it. Let's see here. All right. So where are we at here? The container. Oh, this is interesting. I remember this part. So some typo-squatting going on here, right? It says Kuberntesio is a typo-squatting impersonates the Kubernetes and Kuberntesio accounts. It is a mass millions pools, blah, 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 blah. And the image also mimics the kube-controller manager container image, which is a critical component of the control plane running within a pod on every master node, responsible for detecting and responding to node failures. So they make theirs called Kuberntesio is legit. They make their container image, the malicious one, is Kuberntesio. Barely any difference there, right? And they name their application kube-controller, which mimics the kube-controller manager account. So if any enterprising admin is looking at logs or seeing anything, it looks fairly similar, at least enough that a lot of people is just going to kind of fly by. No one's going to be the wiser. So pretty smart on there. All right, so we have finally made it to basically the end of this. It's doing the crypto mining thing. And now let's talk about first let's the Microsoft threat matrix for Kubernetes. They say they're not mapping it to MITRE because MITRE doesn't have a Kubernetes, right? That's what it says. MITRE has yet to publish a framework for attacks against Kubernetes clusters. So they utilized the threat matrix created by Microsoft and added some suggestions to that. So we've got initial access. Remember, this is going to be our methodology, our kill chain, as it were. Let's see here. Initial access. Expose sensitive interfaces. This is where we've made the mistake when it comes to setting permissions. Then they have execution. This is where they deploy the DaemonSets. Say, hey, run this, grab this lovely image from Docker Hub. You're going to want to use that because it's awesome. Then they create their persistence. That's the next thing on the list. They do the ClusterRoleBinding and creating the ClusterRole. Masquerading, this is where all the typo-squatting and mimicking stuff comes in. This is under defense escalation. Then they have stop competing campaigns. We wouldn't want that. And of course, images from a public registry. Credential access, list K8s secrets, list K8s config maps, list pods. So they're looking for anything they can grab out of that so they can probably reuse that stuff. And then discovery, access the Kubernetes API server. And then impact is resource hijacking, right? Because they're doing crypto mining. All right, finally, what can we do about this? Where can we help me sleep better at night, AquaSec? So ultimately, you do have a file hash, right? So look for that. You can, what else can you do? You can look for the ClusterRole, right? You can look for the DaemonSets. We know the names of those things now. So start searching. Maybe you can script that out. Make your life a little bit easier. Use some programmatic access to that stuff. Automation, we like that. Say, hey, look for these things. Ultimately, we also need to make sure that we are securing our Kubernetes clusters and our cloud environments by making sure that we don't do things like allowing for access from unauthorized, unauthenticated entities, right? So the thing that AquaSec is telling you is like, hey, we've got tools for that. They've got this thing called Trivy that can help you secure. We're going to give them a shout out. Got to be honest with you, right? Because they're doing the hard work of looking for this stuff. And then they can add that into their security platforms, their security tools. So maybe this would be a great tool for you to go out. I don't know. I've never used it. I don't have any hands-on experience with it, but it may be something you definitely want to look into if you're not doing that already. They also have this CNAP thing, which is designed to detect such misconfigurations, protect your K8s clusters. I also found, from AquaSec, a GitHub repo called KubeHunter. And in here, wait for it, KubeHunter hunts for security weaknesses in Kubernetes clusters. The tool was developed to increase awareness and visibility for security issues with Kubernetes environments. Of course, you shouldn't run this thing on against anything you don't own, but hey, check it out. Git clone away. Grab this sucker and fire it up. Maybe it works well for you. You can also run the Python clone yourself, blah, 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 blah. It looks like it's written in Python. So really cool. A lot of documentation along with it. You might want to check it out and see what can it do. Maybe it can discover such things as this. There's other Kubernetes vulnerability scanning tools out there, and GitHub and pay for kind of stuff out there as well. So look into that. It's definitely something you want to do. You need to run vulnerability management and vulnerability assessment on your cloud infrastructure. It's just what's up. If you're not doing it, you're doing yourself a disservice. So make sure you are making that happen. Well, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. I did get to learn a few things about Kubernetes. Hopefully, again, you are learning some stuff about that. Find out whether or not Billy has, kicked his big clunky shoes around inside of your environments. Look for those things. Do some hunting. Do some vulnerability assessment. Do some threat hunting. See if you've got anything going on there. And keep yourself safe in your cloud environments, as it were. Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope to have something really cool for you next week as well. I definitely enjoyed this. Shout out to Aquasec as always for the hard work they put into looking for these vulnerabilities. And until then, it's time for me to bid you a fond farewell. I'm going to go. I'm going to leave. See you guys next time. Stay safe.